Hi, I'm Jeremy. Today, I'll be reviewing Runaways, The Complete Collection, Volume 2 by Brian K. Vaughan, with art by Adrian Alfona and Takeshi Miyazawa. If you watched my last video, you know that I absolutely love this series, and I read The Complete Collection Volume 1 a few years back, but for some reason it's taken me this long to pick up and read The Complete Collection Volume 2, but I did, and I was not disappointed in any way. It was just as good as the first, and I'm going to tell you why. Like how I read Volume 1, Volume 2 right here is of The Complete Collection. This isn't the only way to read it, but I think it's the easiest way to read it if you want to read it straight through like it's a book. Like Volume 1, it's composed of 18 issues which are also collected in Volume 4, True Believers, Volume 5, Escape to New York, and Volume 6, Parental Guidance. So if you'd rather pick up those three collections, or you'd rather just pick up the 18 issues, if you can somehow find them all, you can do that as well, but I'd really recommend reading the complete collection. Something I noticed reading this is that while Volume 1 read a lot like a movie, Volume 2 read more like a season of a TV show. And what I mean by that is that while there is a bigger underlying plot that does begin and mostly get resolved by the end, it's told through several smaller plots. And that's okay, because all of the smaller plots are very unique and interesting, the setups are great, the execution is even better. Even when these smaller stories aren't directly contributing to moving along the underlying plot, they're still revealing and building upon the characters in really interesting ways. The one that was most memorable to me was this one issue where Molly wakes up underground in a sewer, and she was in a fight with the rest of the team. Supposedly she got knocked out, she ended up here. She wakes up and she has this metal necklace thing around, not really a necklace, like a harness almost around her neck, and there's three other kids there who have the same thing. And they introduce each other, and then there's also this really creepy man who's holding them all prisoner. He's the one who put the things on their neck, and he says that he can turn any of them to stone if they disobey him in any way, or if they try to take off their neck braces. He basically is using them to steal from people and bring him money. He's teaching them the art of pickpocketing and such, and robbing without getting caught. He's obviously a sinister person with his own sinister goals, but he tries to convince these kids that he actually loves them, and he's trying to help them because what he's teaching them here is more practical and useful than anything the school or their parents could teach them. And he's also convincing them that if they steal enough for him, he'll set them free eventually. It's a really creepy premise, and the guy himself is just a really creepy villain. And this story really shows Molly's true nature, along with the nature of children in general. That kind of thing is the type of story that really shines through in The Runaways. But the initial premise and the main plot is just as exciting. This volume begins some ways into the aftermath of the end of Volume 1. Basically, the LA area has become just an opening for new villains to try to take power of. So a lot of these lesser known, not that powerful villains are trying to become a big fish in a small pond here. And the Runaways have just been dealing with them, just cleaning up the crime, just continuing to try to survive, and just dealing with whatever shows up in their hometown. It's all going decently until something comes along, or rather someone, that changes everything up. While they're in their hideout, the time machine that used to be used by Gertrude's parents reactivates, and a future version of Gertrude just arrives, and she's basically dying. She tells them that in the future, she is the leader of a branch of the Avengers, and this villain named Victorious has just wiped them all out and is going to basically take over the world and do terrible, unspeakable things to everyone. She tells the Runaways in her dying breath that they need to find this kid named Victor Mancha and kill him now before he becomes victorious in the future. They don't know whether or not to completely believe her or not. Some of them are more convinced than others. Gertrude herself really isn't convinced. But as her future self dies, they kind of collectively agree that they should at least find this Victor Mancha kid. And when they find him, it turns out he's actually just a completely innocent, kinda sheltered kid who's the son of a single mom who's very religious and working 3 jobs, and he doesn't even know his dad because he supposedly died in war when Victor was just a baby. But Victor does have powers. He didn't know he did, but they kind of just come out when he gets confronted by the Runaways. They don't really know what to do with him. They can't just kill an innocent kid. That kind of goes against everything they're all about. But they can't really just leave him either if what future Gertrude is saying is right. So they kind of just kidnap him and keep him with them while they figure out like who he is, if he has any ulterior motives, and what to do with him. Pretty early on, his true origin is revealed, so it's not really a spoiler, but it was pretty mind-blowing to me at the time when I read it, so I don't want to ruin it anyway, so I'm just not going to tell you. Read it yourself and find out. Hopefully you'll be as surprised and excited as I was. While they're kidnapping Victor and bringing him around, another threat comes to them. And there's this support group for ex-superheroes who are basically dedicated to rehabilitating those ex-superheroes and also teaching the younger generation that the superhero lifestyle is really dangerous and they shouldn't be doing it. The Runaways are on their radar at this point. They need to find them and stop them from bringing other people into this lifestyle, and they think they're protecting them from themselves. But to catch them, because they have such great powers and weapons, they need to put back on their costumes and go back to being superheroes themselves. They think it's temporary, but you kind of get the feeling that it's not gonna be. So they're trying to be caught by these guys, they're trying to figure out who Victor is, and other things are going on. The villains are still trying to take control of LA, and the biggest threat, though, is they don't know this yet, but you, the reader, do, is that there is the threat of a possible new Pride coming into play. So that's the initial setup of the main overarching plot. It's fun, it's exciting, and it's kind of chaotic, which really works because following the events of Volume 1, that's the logical way for things to go. It's chaotic and it fits along the whole theme of adolescence and the chaos that is life for them. Brian K. Vaughan is a great writer. The writing in this series is just so on point, so fast-paced, and all the characters are so likable and so believable. And the humor is excellent too. If you're a fan of the recent Marvel movies, and there's a lot of those really quick-witted, fun one-liners that will crack you up, there's plenty of that here too. But one of the most intriguing parts about these characters is that they're kind of morally ambiguous. When you read something like Captain America or Spider-Man, you expect them to be like the heroes. You expect to follow them just unconditionally. They know what's right. They're the good guys. They're fighting the bad guys. You follow them. But with Runaways, it causes you to first of all question the motives of characters like Spider-Man and Captain America, who both appear in this volume, by the way, but also to not look at the protagonists of this story, the Runaways themselves, so objectively. Ultimately, they do have good intentions, but they're young and confused, and they're dealing with a lot of their own problems, and in my opinion, their judgment isn't always the best. For example, Nico Minoru's weapon, the Staff of One, has the potential to be the most powerful weapon the team has access to. Arguably one of the most powerful weapons in the whole Marvel Universe. It can cast spells, it can do almost anything with spells, but it has a serious limitation, and that's that it can't cast any one spell twice. So if you want to teleport with it once, that's your only time. You can never cast any teleportation spell again. You'd think that the wielder of this weapon should be very cautious when they're using it, but Nico is not. She is quite hasty with this. She casts spells without thinking much, without realizing the long-term implications that she's never going to need to be able to cast that spell again, no matter how much she needs to in the future. And in doing so, long-term effects, she might be endangering her teammates and other people by being so hasty about using it. It's stuff like that that makes you question these characters, but ultimately you're still on their side. They're still very likable, and there are much more evil people, much more dangerous people in this world than them. The moral ambiguity of the team makes the introduction of Victor Mancha so meaningful because he's arguably the one with the purest heart, and yet he's also the one who's destined to kill everyone. The relationships between these characters are another highlight of the great writing that this series has. Not just romantic relationships, even though the romantic relationships in this are very well written. Chase and Gertrude are so adorable together. They are very much an OTP for me after reading this especially. But just the relations between each other, the friendships, the rivalries, it's all very realistic, very well written, very captivating, and kind of heartwarming, which makes it all the more heartbreaking when something bad happens. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but let me tell you, if you've been reading this since the beginning, you probably will tear up. The art is often just as important in a comic as the writing, and once again, Adrian Alphona does not disappoint. His art style is realistic and fitting for the characters. It's just nice to look at. This time though, there is one other artist who partially worked on the series. His name is Takeshi Miyazawa. He only wrote one issue in this volume, and once you get to that issue, the change in art style is kind of jarring because his art style is way different than Adrian Alphona's, particularly in the characters' faces. It's a lot more simple, somewhat anime-ish. It's still nice to look at, but it's so different than Adrian Alphona's realistic style. But it's only one issue, and if this is the issue that's going to be, it does sort of fit the more lighthearted tone of that particular issue. It complements the writing. I have no complaints. Right after that, you'll get back into Adrian Alphona's art, which stays good all the way through. I love this series. I love the characters, I love the plot, I love the action, I love the humor. Anything else I'm going to say is just going to be all around high recommendations for this series. If you haven't read it already, please do, but don't start with the Complete Collection Volume 2. Start with Volume 1, because I don't think I would have understood this if I started with it. You have to read the first story arc for it to make any sense. That's all I've got to say about Runaways Complete Collection Volume 2. The Complete Collection Volume 3 got released just last month, and I really want to read it, I want to buy it, I want to indulge in it, and just get fully absorbed in these characters and this story once again. I don't know when I'm going to be able to buy it, though. I don't know when it's going to get here, I don't know where I'm going to buy it, but I'm going to try to. Also, though, the Runaways are getting a reboot next month. I found out about this while I was searching the internet for stuff about Volume 3. I have mixed feelings on this. So much so that I can't fit them all into this video. I'm going to put them into a separate video. So be on the lookout for that. But as for now, this has been my review of The Runaways Complete Collection Volume 2. Please check this series out. I cannot tell you enough how great it is and how much it is accessible to people who don't normally read comics. Thank you for watching. Be on the lookout for my next video. Bye!